Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Great to be with you today. This month, we're all about onboarding and welcome campaigns, and we'll walk you through a few tips to help you personalize the experience. A lot of data considerations to think about, and how that data is really going to help you to personalize these campaigns. So let's jump in. My name is Derek Bell. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by Adrian Jones, our CEO and founder, who is helping manage Q&A and chat. So please make sure you use both of those. Of course, all sessions are recorded, and you'll have access within a week or so. All right, so what's our agenda for the next 45 minutes? Well, I suppose the first one is we really need to get a definition as to what we mean when we say welcome, excuse me, or on what is an onboarding campaign. And are they different? Are they the same thing? We'll explore that. And I'll explain why I believe they're reasonably different and why that's the case. Then we'll look at, let's start at the very beginning. That's really trying to qualify who actually falls into either a welcome or an onboarding campaign and what underlying data we might have to help us understand that. And then what do we know? And that really comes down to the data again. As I said, there's a lot of data considerations for today's topic. How do you structure the campaign? So I've got a couple of campaign canvas examples I want to walk you through of some campaigns that you've actually participated in. The fact that you're on the user group webinar and subscribed to the Eloqua user group means you would have gone through our welcome campaign. So I want to show you that so you can see what that looks like and some of the tips and ideas that you might want to consider should you be doing the same thing. Then if we have time, we'll jump into a couple of points I just wanted to revisit with release 25D, which took place, finished up in the middle of November. So everyone's live on 25D. And then of course Q&A. But as I said, Q&A is always happening throughout the webinar. So please, don't feel like you need to wait till the end. Use the Q&A or the chat, whichever is easiest, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, so which is it? Let's be clear about what we're talking about today. Let's jump in. Okay, so let's start with the welcome campaign. And if you think back, some stores still do this. They have a store greeter. You walk into the physical store, and there'll be somebody there to greet you. It used to be that it was every store. That's kind of changed now, obviously. But in our digital world, I suppose we have a virtual store, and we want to be able to welcome people as they enter into our database. So how does a person qualify necessarily? So maybe the contact is brand new to your database or brand, and that in and of itself raises a few questions because maybe they're new into Eloqua, but are they new from your CRM or your membership database or your ERP? Maybe they've been in those systems for a while, could be weeks, months, or even years. And then for whatever reason, they've worked their way into Eloqua. So Eloqua sees them as new, but are they in fact new to the brand? So some considerations that need to be thought through there. A welcome campaign is more of an introduction to the brand. It's typically not an opportunity to sell. We're not typically selling shoes and handbags and jeans and those sorts of consumable items. We're usually selling something, at least for most Eloqua clients, you're selling things that require time and consideration, and in some cases can be quite a complex selling environment. So we don't need to necessarily sell them stuff right away. We need to help them understand who we are, building trust and those sorts of things. One way you can do that, of course, is to invite them to subscribe to topics of interest. Now, that means, of course, you need to have a really nice preference center that is easy to understand. People can then go through the process of subscribing to different things. Maybe it's webinars, or maybe it's based on topics. Maybe it's in-person events. Maybe you have an annual event of some sort and they want to make sure they get that invitation to participate, all those sorts of things. And that falls into the next step, which is really about educating them about what you do and how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. It also can be an opportunity to explain how to engage with you. Make it really clear there's an online form. You may have a physical store presence or an office presence around the country or around the world. The website might be the best place. You may have a good presence on LinkedIn, different social platforms that you may want to make these people aware of and invite them to participate and sort of join the conversation in that process. That's what I would suggest to you a welcome campaign is all about. Now, how does that differ to an onboarding campaign? So I suppose it may come down to vernacular or language at the end of the day, but from my point of view, I would then see an onboarding campaign as new customers versus new contacts. And it's a slightly more formal process in that these are now people who have actually parted with some money. Okay. They've signed a contract, they've parted with some cash, and they're now engaging with you, excuse me, as a customer. This one will typically be a more tailored experience. And as we talked about the need for data. So if we look at whether you're a membership-based organization, is the person now a new member? Have they in fact parted with an annual fee or a monthly fee, however that construct may be? If they're a university student, they may have made inquiries, etc., but now are they actually an enrolled and attending student on campus or virtually, whichever it may be? Trying to understand all of these things typically requires good CRM or ERP or membership database or student management system, whichever it is, connected to Eloqua. So Eloqua can understand these things, because Eloqua typically is not the source of truth to determine when somebody goes from being a lead or a prospect to becoming a customer or a member or a student, an enrolled student on campus. And now the other thing that you would probably want to do from an onboarding point of view is make it a little more tailored. And it may not be a simple one size fits all scenario. So if you have many products or services, it may depend on what the person or the company has actually purchased. If they're a member, there may be different types of membership level, for example. So we want to make sure we take them through an onboarding campaign that reflects what they've actually purchased in the membership level that they've subscribe to. So you can see there already that the onboarding process is quite different. And I sort of threw together some examples to try and cement this point, I suppose. So on the left-hand side, we've got welcome, and on the right-hand side, we have onboarding. And here's just some examples. There's a little bit of the behavior that you might expect of people who would fall into a welcome campaign. So a prospective student, they just make an inquiry. That's it. They're not enrolling. They're just simply making an inquiry. Maybe a CEO who accesses a white paper. They download something because it's of interest. That's it. They're not parting with any money at that point. A medical professional logs an inquiry about educational courses for their professional development that they may be required to do. Or an engineer attends a webinar on global shipping safety. Great topic, but again, they're not buying anything from you at that point. So they would all qualify, generally speaking, for the welcome campaign. Now, the onboarding campaign, you can see these scenarios now become a little bit different. This is typically, as I said, where I would suggest to you the person has now signed a contract, they've parted with some money, and they're now engaging with you on a professional basis. And so that onboarding campaign becomes quite different to the content, and the content really is the key difference here in relation to the welcome campaign. If we think about the underlying mechanics of how Eloqua might deliver this, that's actually probably quite similar between welcome and onboarding. It's the content and probably some of the personalization that we wanted to talk about today that would separate these two constructs. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of framework for today, or for the benefit of today. We'll be focusing mostly on the welcome campaign, largely so that I didn't have to say welcome and onboarding 35 times during the course of the webinar. But fundamentally, you'll see that it's much the same from a mechanical point of view, at least. So welcome campaign is really for prospects or leads. The onboarding campaign is really now for customers or clients or members, depending on how you engage with your audience. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. We're going to go back and try and understand from a lead point of view what this person looks like, how we understand that, and what the underlying data can tell us. So we know that the difference between a lead-focused and a customer-focused campaign is pretty different. The way we communicate, the content that we share, those sorts of things are substantially different done well. So the lead campaigns focus on building trust, education, and also guiding the person towards a demo or the next funnel step or whatever the next process is in your buying journey. But I think building trust, educating, and sort of guiding them, that's part of what the welcome campaign is. And it obviously plugs in quite nicely then to a lead nurture campaign that they may well fall into once they go through a welcome campaign. In contrast, customer onboarding focuses on product adoption and setup and how to maximize what it is they've actually purchased, whether it's a service or a physical product, whichever it might be. Okay. So at Marketing Cube, we use a model that we've designed called Design for Automation. And this really is driven by our length of time working with marketing automation and understanding that there's obviously a marketing strategy, an overarching marketing strategy, but there's a need to also have consideration and to design for automation in a part of that. This process we follow, and I'm going to show you here in a moment how I followed it to help with today's topic. Marketing strategy has to be obviously the number one goal, because we want to make sure that our automation and everything we do within Eloqua falls under that and supports that process. We often need to look at customer insights. We need to understand who it is we're talking to, our audience, and we've touched on that a little bit already today. Then we need to look at the actual journey. What does that look like? And to think about the campaign canvas as a significant part of that journey and how we can deliver it. But it's just one part. There can be other entry points from social, and things might happen afterwards. And there's physical, in-person things that happen as well. So that journey can be quite extensive. Then looking at the experience overall and how we customize that, how we personalize that. And that's really what we're trying to do today. The content strategy is critical. It's great having this big email machine to send lots of great things to people, but unless we have things to send, so that content strategy, is quite critical to the process. And then, of course, managing success and going back and really looking at reporting, looking at the analytics, working out what's working what's not, understanding what's not working, etc. So managing that whole process so that we can optimize and improve. That's our Design for Automation framework. And pretty much, should you ever engage with us, that's largely the process that we would walk you through, regardless of what it is we're talking about. So let's bring that down a level now and focus on our welcome campaign. What I've done is just sort of try and give you a few steps to think through if you're going to go away after this and get the team together in a room and talk about, okay, well, welcome campaign, what are we going to do? First question is, well, how far back do we go? Where is the beginning? So it falls to that point I made a little bit earlier, where just because somebody's come into Eloqua as a brand new contact, in many situations, you can probably rely on that as being the first point of contact with the company from a digital point of view, but it may not be the case. So you need to think that one through. If you've had people sitting in your CRM and student management or membership database, whatever it might be, even the ERP, they may have been there for a while. So when they come into Eloqua and we flag them as being new, do they in fact qualify to go through the welcome campaign? I can't give you an answer to that. You need to figure that one out. We can help you if you need help, but yeah, that one needs to be workshopped and thought through. So they're typically leads is probably the key thing there. Then you've got to think about crafting your message. So once we understand our audience and typically who we're talking to, we need to make sure that our message blends nicely with that overall marketing strategy that we've got, that voice that we're trying to convey, the messages that we're trying to get across to people. Then build the content. Now, in many cases, from a welcome campaign point of view, you may be able to recycle a bit of content. It may not necessarily be brand new stuff that you need to create. You may choose to do that, but you can also recycle, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to welcome and educate them, and you want to point them to the website and explain, this is where you can find this is where you can find that. These are the best phone numbers to reach our call center team or our service team, etc. Here's links to this, and this. So you're kind of welcoming them and like that store greeter, you're walking around and maybe showing them different things that they have access to. So maybe from a content point of view, it's not a massive task, which is always nice. Now, one key piece of advice I would give you is, we have clients varying here. We have some clients who will see it, up to 1,000 new contacts in their database on a weekly basis. That's a big number, or a reasonably sized number, depending on how many you've got in your database, but it's a big number regardless. And so what you typically don't want to do is create this brand new campaign and then just drive everybody through it. I would encourage you to take a sample size, break that down, not so much an A/B test thing, but kind of just break it down and let a few people go through. Maybe it's in the hundreds versus in the thousands, etc. Let them run through and then optimize, review, have a look at what happened, make sure there were no roadblocks, etc. Even better, if you get a chance to maybe identify, maybe there are some friendly people in there, you could have a chat with them and see what they thought. Did it help them? Did it shape what they did? That sort of stuff. So the sample size is a good idea. Now, once you're happy with that, then you would fall into a go live scenario where you turn this thing on. And the key point is this is an always on campaign. So the welcome campaign isn't something that every month or so you go through when you find a bunch of new contacts and you push them into a segment and then you add them to the campaign necessarily. This is potentially happening on a daily basis, maybe every 24 hours. Eloqua is going through, identifying new contacts. We may run them through a little bit of a segment and some filters to get rid of a few people and all that sort of stuff. You shrink it down a bit, and then they just fall into the campaign. So the always on nature of a welcome campaign is a time saver in and of itself. Okay. So finessing the audience, and this is taking us down probably another level. And these are just some things for you to think about and consider as you look at either building or editing a welcome campaign that you may have in place today. So what do you do about current subscribers or current customers that are in your database today? So let's say we take a month or so. We're all happy. We've got the welcome campaign ready. It's ready to go on the 1st of January. And you've set your criteria. And so anybody new from the 1st of January will fall into that. Fantastic. What about your huge database? Is there any value in considering a subset of those people potentially to go through the welcome campaign? Maybe a transition of some sort can help. Maybe there's a slightly different first email that goes to that group, and then they fall into what is the new welcome campaign. If you're transitioning from an old one to a new one, just have a think about that. Do you want those people to conclude the process in the old campaign? Should they go through the new campaign? There's no right or wrong answer necessarily. It really depends on the content. Is the content in the welcome campaign so much different than the old one that it makes a logical sense for them to flow through? It could be. And then also, what about exclusions? So there are typically going to be people that you don't want to go through the welcome campaign. Competitors always comes to mind. These people are easily blocked, at least if they're using their work email address. You can block domains. If you're not sure how to do that, just give us a call and we can help you with that one. But you can put a master exclude on them essentially. So the exclusions, you might also want to think about different customers, potentially business partners, staff. I would suggest that your internal staff, as they come into the new hires come into the business, they should go through the welcome campaign. You want them to be familiar with what it is that you're talking to people about. Have them become familiar. So if somebody asks them, "Hey, I saw this email," and they've got no idea what it was, so that can be helpful as well. So yeah, think about your exclusions. I just wanted to give you an example. There's a client of ours, Flight Centre, which is an Australian travel company, but a global brand. Now, during COVID, we had some fun times, as you would imagine, being a travel-based company. They were having some challenges, like most companies around the world were at that particular time. But one of the things they decided to do was to work really well on what was essentially a lead nurture campaign, but really started off as kind of a welcome campaign to have people coming in. And one of the key things they did was focus on persona development. So this was a series of workshops over about 6 months that we did with Flight Centre. I think there were something like 56 different unique workshops that we ran. There were hundreds of hours of Zoom. The good thing was everybody was at home. So it made it easy for everybody to participate, which was good. And that was across Australia, New Zealand, parts of Asia, South Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and North America. So it was kind of everywhere, which was a lot of fun. But I thought instead of giving you all of the detail, I thought I'd kind of go to the benefits, the output. And this is one of the key ones. So they saw with the application of persona-based welcome campaigns. So this is where they've asked a few questions at that very initial point, where they're able to identify kind of who this person is and why in their role they're engaging with Flight Centre. So, for example, am I the CEO and I'm always flying first class? Or am I the travel booker who is kind of doing all the work, etc.? Am I in the finance team? Whatever their role was, that helped them to break down a persona. the output was extraordinary, a 26% increase in unique open rates on those campaigns that were now persona based, and a 100% increase in unique click-through rates for persona-driven campaigns. So it became a no-brainer for them that this was clearly the way to go. And this was actually really easy for them to identify because they were able to separate different campaigns from a historical point of view, those moving forward, and they absolutely saw the difference. So just giving you an idea, because I want to share with you how potentially getting to know these people very early at those very early entry points and asking a really smart question could help you potentially to be in a position just like Flight Centre by asking a really good question. So we need to work out what your really good question is. So typically today, you will ask loads of different questions, and I'm just throwing some here in front of you right now. Some are very sort of single select pick list response type questions. Others might be just a single text box where they need to pop information in, etc. Free text is generally the worst because it's much harder for you to do something with. But single select pick lists, all those sorts of things are much easier from a data point of view. But first name, last name, and email address is probably where most of us start, right? And if we take all of those away and just kind of look at this, we go, well, how on earth am I going to understand how to personalize further with just that piece of information? All right, let's have a look. Just a tip from a technical point of view, as far as Eloqua is concerned, the only email address that you must have on a form, the only field you must have on a form is email address. It's it. That's the only one that's actually required. Everything else is completely optional. Now, of course, we have lots more that we want to add. Now, at Marketing Cube, I just thought I'd give you an example. This is what we do, and this is kind of like our baseline. So first name, last name, email, company name, country, and then marketing automation platform role. So you've probably seen this question, or you maybe have answered it and we don't show it to you again, but marketing automation platform role, we position that in different ways. Sometimes we're like, which of the following statements best describes you? And so in there, it's things like, I access Eloqua every day. I'm the Eloqua administrator. I'm a senior executive. I don't use it, but I need to understand how it works. So we kind of break it down to get a little bit more of an understanding as to kind of who these people are. So that's our sort of winning question that we put right up front in most of the engagements that people would have with us. That helps us to tailor communications from an inclusion and exclusion point of view moving forward. Okay, so let's move Marketing Cube out of the way. If we think about all we have is first name, last name, and email address, that's not actually quite true because you've got this attribution data. If it's set up and if you've got it organized, if you don't, obviously, again, please reach out. We can help you with this. But when someone reaches a form, let's take an inquiry form, they've come from somewhere. Now, that from could be a good indicator. Maybe they're looking at specific products on your website and they go from there to the inquiry form, or they're looking at membership information and different levels of so, and they get on inquiry and they go to the form. Eloqua forms are incredibly smart. Let me give you an example. So if I go to a real estate client, actually, and so this real estate client sold high-rise apartments, and not all actually high-rise, but apartments, essentially. And for every development that they had, they would have a microsite. And that microsite would typically have 6 or 7 pages, and it would be all the things that you would expect. Lovely homepage, another page that had floor plans, another page had beautiful photos of kitchen, the bathroom, the sort of the key areas within the house, and then there'd be, small print, etc. And there would be an inquiry form. And that was pretty much the same model that they've focused on for every single development, of which there were hundreds of these developments. But there was one Eloqua form. All of those hundreds of microsites for all those different developments that they were running across the country, when the person clicked on submit, the information that was captured from that specific microsite, brought into Eloqua, and then processed and sent off in a whole range of different directions. So if you're looking at development A, you would get information sent to you via email in relation to development A. It would also go off into the CRM and create leads, etc., associated with that particular development, and so on and so forth. My point to you is that your Eloqua form can be an incredibly powerful tool to capture this attribution information. So have a little think about that. Now, if we go back to our topic, which is the welcome campaign, we take people through. In that example, we know exactly which development they were interested in, which apartment they were looking at. So the welcome campaign they get dropped into is very much on brand. So that real estate client of ours wouldn't really have their brand front and center. They were kind of just mentioned down in the footer. The brand was all about the brand of the actual development itself, so the property development. And that's how they personalize it. And so as a result of those hundreds of properties, there were hundreds of campaigns that were running. And each campaign was quite unique because every building, every property was unique in what it offered, where it was, and all those sorts of things. So attribution data, where did they come from? You don't simply just have first name, last name, email address. You actually also have attribution data that can really help enhance things. So think about the website page they've come from. Maybe they came from a social site, very specific content, maybe like the example I just shared with the property people. You can then use your conditional steps within the form processing steps to drive people in all sorts of different directions. Now, depending on how complex it gets, you may push them into a program to help you kind of sort through all that and then route them off to relevant campaigns. There's a number of ways you could do that. So you do have more, you do have information. So the point then being, if we have that information, maybe we don't have to have a one size fits all approach to a welcome campaign. Maybe we take somebody through different streams. One of the other key messages I wanted to try and get across today was, let's not boil the ocean. Let's not make it this ridiculously complex, necessarily welcome campaign. And here I'm telling you, let's go to stream A, B, and C. So letting you know what's possible, I'd encourage you to start simple and kind of build up based on your reporting, doing your analysis, look at your optimization, get things humming, and then start to expand as you see the need and you see, well, hang on a minute, there's a disproportionate number of people in that welcome campaign that we probably could take on a slightly different welcome experience than everybody else. So have a think about that. But all of these things are pretty simple to set up. They're not overly complex and can really make a difference in relation to what's happening. All right. So the key point there is, and data sort of sits under all of this, right? So what you know will shape the CX you deliver, and the things that you know are typically in Eloqua and maybe coming in from the CRM or membership or different systems coming into Eloqua, but your colleagues can really enhance this experience. So if somebody comes into your platform, into Eloqua, they synchronize back into potentially a CRM platform, where they're then touched either by a call center or by a sales team or by whomever. Those people, if they have interactions, also have opportunity to update information within the CRM platform. So in a conversation with the call center operator might be able to update the geography, let you know the person's from California versus being from New York, or East Coast, West Coast, depending on how you break that down. Maybe they're international, maybe they're domestic, whatever it might be. Maybe their industry can be added, so that's uncovered in the course of the conversation. So this is kind of marketing needing to have a chat with the rest of your colleagues to say, hey, team, if you add information to the profile that's stored within the CRM, we can actually deliver a more personalized experience at our end. So please feel free to make sure you update the system, because that information will flow through. It will enhance what we can do at our end as well. So I'll leave that with you to digest and think about. All right. So if you've got the team sitting in a room and maybe it's time to try and think about this welcome campaign and what it might look like, I would suggest to you this could be a good discussion starter. Probably not the end, but a good discussion starter. So think about defining what is a net new contact. That's going to be one of the key things. Okay, so who actually qualifies to go through the campaign? We really need to understand that as soon as possible. And so think about people coming in from web forms, We have a client who's just been through a bit of a process of creating a new welcome campaign, and they worked out there were like, I think, 16 or 17 separate forms that they had that people could inquire in relation to their services that they offer. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just knowing that there were 16 or 17 forms. So again, it's not the quantity of the forms is not the problem. As I said, that real estate client, they had hundreds of forms. Well, actually, they had hundreds of sites that fed into one single Eloqua form, slightly different scenario. But that's fine, as long as we know where they are, where they're coming in, and we need to understand that so that we can find out who qualifies and route them accordingly. Event registrations can be another one that can sometimes slip through the keeper. So think about that one. And where is that source of truth housed? Is it in fact Eloqua, or is it the CRM or other platforms within the organization? The exclusions, again, can be something to consider. So competitors always comes to mind, right? So we typically don't want to welcome them or to run them through your campaigns. Return customers. Now, I say this one can be fun because when does a customer go to being a ex-customer, go to being a prospect? Do you have a defined process for that? Or if it's a member, if a member's membership has lapsed, for example, and they've not renewed, well, for how long do you go for that lapsed membership to be in place before you identify them potentially as a prospective member or a lead, should they come back into the system? And if they do come back into the system, then do they in fact qualify to go through the welcome campaign? Fun, right? So all of these things need to be considered and thought through. All right, the messaging and the content, this is the great start. But once you've got the contact down and you understand who you're talking to, who the audience is not, just as importantly, the exclusions, then we can start to think about what's the core objective, what are we trying to do, how long should this campaign run for. I'll show you one here in just a few minutes, which will give you an idea as one example. And also, are there any absolute exit points that are triggered by other activities? For example, let's take a membership-based organization. Somebody makes an inquiry, you go through that process, they come into the welcome campaign. Let's say you have 10 emails over 10 weeks. Okay. 5 weeks into that, the person's like, you know what? I'm going to join. This is great. So they click through, but now become a member. What happens in week 6? Do they get the week 6 welcome email? Or is the welcome campaign smart enough to be able to query and go, well, hang on a minute, that campaign member is actually now a member. Therefore, let's exclude them from the welcome campaign. And I suppose if we think about it logically, they would then progress to an onboarding campaign. Think about that one. So are there any absolute exit points that would trigger that? Have a think about that. Okay, so how to structure your campaign. Let's have a look here at a campaign canvas, and I'll show you an example of one here. But I also wanted to just talk quickly about channels. So the channels are important, and which channel you may use. It's not a binary exercise. We're not going to do one or the other. It may well be a mix. And we're certainly seeing things shifting and changing in this. So SMS has been adopted really well across many of our clients, not all, but many of our clients. But it's largely used in a B2B context, not so much for selling. I know we've just had Black Friday, and I don't know about you, but my fingers are almost bleeding from swiping and getting rid of all of the promotional SMSs that have come through, along with the emails that have come through. So I love Black Friday. Wonderful. In the B2B world, it's a bit different. And you know that, right? Obviously, email is the big one. WhatsApp, I think, is the emerging one. And looking at who's on our call today, I think for certainly the US and Canadian markets, and definitely the Australian market, and probably our friends in the UK, the WhatsApp is like, well, that's consumer world, or that's basic sort of, inquiry type information, etc. However, if you switch over to markets like Brazil, parts of Asia, and definitely India, B2B and high value transaction organizations are also now using WhatsApp to do a whole range of really cool things. We're going to expand on this in a little bit more detail next year, but I would give that to you as a thought bubble for now, as to what that might look like, and we'll discuss a little bit more next year. But one of the key things we're seeing in the Australian market for many of our clients who are dealing with international audiences. And those international audiences, if we take, say, our educational sector, for example, a lot of those marketers we work with are the international marketing teams. And so they're talking to people in India, in Brazil, in parts of Asia, Western Europe and the US and all North America. And they're definitely seeing a preference for people wanting to use WhatsApp. Now, it can work nicely with Eloqua. So that's enough. I'll move on, but we'll talk more about that one next year. If you've got any questions in the meantime, please reach out. Okay, so bridging campaigns. This is something you've got to think about. So the welcome campaign I'm about to show you, we've had running for nearly 10 years. It's not the one campaign, I promise. It's been optimized over those years and there's been changes made. But each time there are changes made, we need to think about who's in that campaign at the moment and do we get them over to the new campaign? Do we let them go through that campaign and complete it? And then do we shut that one off and then kick the new one off sort of simultaneously, etc. And then just repoint things. So typically it's programs we're using to get people into those. So these are all considerations and things that you want to think about as you do it. So the bridging campaign concept is something to think about. All right, let's jump in. So yeah, as I said, this is a campaign that we've run for nearly 10 years. It's essentially 2 canvases. I'll explain why 2 when I show them to you. And we optimize them every 12 to 18 months. And the beginning of next year is the next time we're due for optimization. So let's have a look. All right, so I'll zoom in here just a little bit. Might make it a bit easier for you. So first thing, this is what I've called part A. And then we have part B. So part A. So we have multiple entry points. These are from forms. They're from programs. This is the part of the optimization process that we kind of picked up where we were missing a group. This is a number of years ago now, we figured this out. But when people would sometimes, you can go to our website and register or subscribe, and that was the easy way for us to get you into this campaign. However, some people would share an email. So you may subscribe proactively, doing that on our website. You get the invitation, and then you share that with your colleague. And so your colleague would click on the link, get to the form, pop in their information, and that's actually their first point of contact with us versus going through the actual preference center exercise. And so what we needed to do was make sure any of those people that were in fact new came through to the welcome campaign as well. So that's through the optimization process and looking at the data. That's where we figured out several years ago that we were missing a group of people in that process. So all sorts of fun things are happening here. We're dropping people into shared lists. We're asking questions in relation to how many emails they've been sent. That was part of the bridging exercise from the old one, which was 2024 April. So I'm actually a bit early, but yeah, we're going to probably redo this in the start of next year anyway, because there's so much that's changed in Eloqua that we need to fresh the content in what's going on here. So we look at join dates, which is their subscription date. We apply it if it's not there. Now, this is the key one here is, are they a customer or are they a prospect? Now, for those on the call who are not customers of Marketing Cube, I promise we're not holding back. It's just that there are just slightly different messaging that we would want to get across to our customers versus people like yourself who are attending and are prospects. We would obviously call you a prospect if you are okay with that. And then we go through. So really this whole canvas and all these different pieces that you can see are really essentially sending one of 3 emails. So this is largely the confirmation email, confirmation to membership. I could use the form to send that, as you know, as an autoresponder, but I don't. We push them through here because we want to apply things like an email signature and a few other bits and pieces as well. All right, so let's have a look at campaign B. So everybody moves from campaign A. We use the Eloqua tools to move them over now onto this campaign. And essentially what you're looking at is on the left is prospect communications and on the right is customer communication. So at the entry point, you can see at the top here, from another campaign, etc. We route them through. And what you might notice is there's all these lines going from the left to the right, left to the right, left to the right. So the key question we're asking there is, are they a customer? And again, this is part of the optimization process that we worked out many years ago now, is that we had some scenarios where people would be prospects, they'd come through, they'd be going through the welcome campaign, and before they concluded the welcome campaign, they'd in fact become a customer. So what we would do is flick them over to the right-hand side now, sort of continue the journey, still getting the same volume of email, but just the language has changed ever so slightly. Now, I could use dynamic content to have a single stream. I kind of liked having the two streams, which was just from a reporting point of view. I liked being able to split out the assets and see them from a reporting point of view. Again, you can get reporting in dynamic content in a single asset. It just really comes down to personal preference at the end of the day, and so on and so forth. So timing wise, this is 5 emails. Well, 6. If you take the confirmation, then there's the 5 emails in the actual campaign. And you can see we're doing it over 5 weeks. Now, it does depend, it does slow down or speed up a little bit, depending on how involved they are. And that's what this is doing. So there's an evaluation period here of 3 weeks. So that means that it could potentially go up to 15 weeks, I think, if I do my math correctly and think about that. But all things being equal, if people engage, they'll move through that campaign within a 5-week period. So that's just one example of a welcome campaign and one way to think about it. The nice thing about using the, using the evaluation period is you're able to determine if the person, and that's still not it, here it is, this is the evaluation period, 3 weeks, is that the faster somebody engages with you, the faster you can then in turn engage with them. Okay, so evaluation periods are really quite helpful. This one here, so this one I clicked on. So this is what we call all-time user group registrants. And so part of the language we use in these communications is, oh, it looks like you may not have had a chance to register with or register to attend versus, oh, it's great that you registered. What did you think? So we can use that different language. And so that's just using we have a form template that we use every month for the Eloqua user group. And in the processing steps, there's a processing step that's been there for probably like 9 or 10 years that pushes people into a shared list. And that shared list has probably been there for 9 or 10 years. And that shared list is anybody that has ever registered, not attended, etc., but registered for an Eloqua user group webinar. And so I use that as my source of truth to determine then which email these people get. So I'm able to send them an email and say, hey, looks like you haven't had a chance to register, etc. So that's just one example of some underlying data. There's no coding involved in any of this process, remember. It's all pretty simple. So that's an example of a welcome campaign. Now, I'm going to run out of time here in a minute. If you've got any questions, please shoot those through. Adrian's eagerly waiting for any questions that you might have. I'm just going to dive through quickly. A lot of the North American market, this is probably not a big deal. For pod 6, 7, and 8, some of you may or may not be on pod 6, which I think is Virginia, for example. All of the Gen AI stuff is now being processed out of Frankfurt versus out of Chicago. That's the key thing to understand. What's the impact of that? Look, it's not necessarily a big deal for the North American market, I would argue. In relation to the enhancements for Gen AI, you've now got the ability to do the rewrite, expand, condense, and convert to bullet points. So this is available within the AI content writer within Eloqua. So whether you're in email, landing pages, and if you've got Redwood turned on, you will also get it in the dynamic content area and shared lists. Dynamic content, yes, dynamic and shared content is Redwood only for you to see that information. There's been significant changes to the Oracle Labs Zoom app. So not the Zoom app from Zoom, but the actual Oracle Labs app for Zoom. We won't have time to discuss those here today. I'll put more information into the blog post so you can see that. One thing I just wanted to correct, last month I talked about, and I misunderstood these campaign permissions. Essentially what you can do is if you're an administrator and you're looking at permissions within your profiles, there's an option called campaigns, and that's it. There was no delineation between multi-step and simple campaigns. there is now. So now if you've got a group or user community that really have no need to access multi-step campaigns and really do everything in simple campaigns, then you can adjust their profile access so they no longer have access to multi-step campaigns. Now, you don't need to do anything today. If you feel there's no need for any change, you don't have to do anything because all of the profiles are ticked in both case, which is fine. It's only if you want to limit a person's ability to one or the other that you would need to go in and make some changes. If that's something you'd like to do and are not sure what to do, please reach out and we'd be more than happy to assist you with that. So this one is just me having a little bit of fun with you. This is Christmas in Australia, by the way. This is how terrible it looks at Christmas time. But we're back in 2026, and we look forward to seeing you on the 3rd of February. So January, we're all at the beach, that one right there that you can see. But 3 p.m. Eastern time will be for New York, Toronto, East Coast time. Now, for our European friends, if there are Europeans on the call today, we're going to be live with a 3rd episode for your market. So Berlin, Prague, Central European time, 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of February. So I look forward to seeing you there. Well, thank you, everybody, for your support throughout the year. I hope you're getting value from the user group. We would love to hear more from you. Please send through questions. Enjoy your break if you're getting a little one. You've probably already had your summer break, so this is kind of your Northern Hemisphere Christmas and New Year break. Be safe, have fun, spend time with family and those people that are important to you. And I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.